Good evening. Today, as part of revising current affairs for prelims, we will see some information regarding Nobel Prizes. Right. So there were questions originally in awards and prizes way back, but later they slightly altered the questioning style by asking fundamentals from where the original Nobel prizes were given. Okay. Say for example, when in science, basically physics, chemistry, or physiology, when they try to provide prizes for a particular invention, the basis of the invention were actually asked in the prelims. So that is how the things were moving on. And similarly, even in when game theory was given Nobel, they asked it. And when we had the latest objects, and when he had data-based or information-based decision making. So again, we had questions related to it in various forms. So it is not a direct question who is who or for whom the awards are provided, but the core issue in that core, the fundamentals are tested. Okay, so that's a basis. Fine. So when we see Nobel Prizes, so we have Nobel Prizes uh, announced for various fields or in various fields, especially physics, chemistry, physiology, or medicine. And we have literature, peace, and economic sciences. And we have these institutions which involve in selecting the rightful personalities or organizations. So in that, one important organization is the Norwegian Nobel Committee. And this Nobel Committee is the one which lists down the Peace Prize winners. Right. And the Nobel Prize for Economics, it is called as the Sveriges Riksbank, that is the Sweden's central bank name. So that is separately given in memory of Alfred Nobel later. Okay, it was not in the original list, but in the later part we have provided. So all these awards were as per the will of Alfred Nobel, who wanted to encourage people to contribute to the mankind. And we don't have it for mathematics because Alfred Nobel felt that uh, these Nobel Prizes should be awarded for those who have some practical reality, whereas he felt that mathematics is more theoretical, and that's a reason why he left over mathematical science rather than he chose others, right? Especially physics, chemistry, physiology, peace, and so on, right? So anyway, so this is how the Nobel Prize was started, and we'll see one by one. So this year we have in physics, the Nobel Prize was provided for uh, the invention or the discovery of the speed or the time frame in which an electron actually move. So this we call it as photosecond. So this particular experiment for photoseconds pulses were done by three important physicists, and they were provided in this particular order. So here the most important thing is they will be asking about the acceleration of electrons, so how electrons actually flow and at what speed they actually flow, and why there is a issue in understanding their speed. Because of high speed movement, it is really difficult for human to capture or the behavior of this electron dynamics. So what happened? So they tried to create an experiment, okay, in which they tried to generate uh, a laser, okay, which in tandem moved with this particular speed, synchronized speed. And naturally, when the laser light is transmitted to a gas chamber. So where the atoms freely move and how this particular electrons behave. So when synchronizing happens, so when they coincide, they try to get a combined beam, and that particular observation we have 1 billionth of the second, that is 1 attosecond we have. Okay. So this particular thing is measured because of laser, and we try to capture that particular laser, and that frequency is measured, and that's how this particular electron movement or electron transfer is being understood. So why we want to have this particular method? So till now, what happened was we never we assumed or we tried to have some averaging out of the behavior of electrons, how the electrons move or how the electrons perform in a particular given aspect. So now what we have some observation by which how the electrons move and what is a pattern and how they transfer from insulator to become a conductor, or how they try to perform in different conditions, so we can use them. And similarly, when we could understand their behavior, we can use them in medicinal field. So in all these conditions, we could use these discoveries of the properties of uh, electrons. So that is a important reason why this particular discovery was provided with Nobel. And apart from that, this particular electron dynamics involve in understanding the wave oscillations of light, because you send laser, right? And naturally that particular properties of wave oscillation can be understood. And here they can ask you about what is wave, what is oscillation, so what is what do you call overtone, so how the overtone is, and what is harmonics. So these basics you try to have a basic clarity where you can have some definitions which you have it in your science book that can be easily available. So the basics of wave oscillation, what is the difference between the wave and oscillation? So how a wave is generated through oscillation. So what is the difference between overtone and harmonics in application side, not by definition. So when these are understood, so we can have a possibly a spectroscopy which can detect these molecules, and we can have a realistic uh, images of universe and so on. So it has a very great impact or influence in the future with these methods, because they discovered how to identify, and now based on advancements they try to improvise it, thereby the um, overall understanding of electrons is provided. So this is one significant thing what we had in physics. Whereas in chemistry, so what we had was a nano-sized particle called quantum dot was created. Okay, so it is for the creation of nano-sized particles. Say, for example, you know nanoparticles, and in that nanoparticle, so this particular quantum dot is almost a size which ranges from 1 to 100 nanometer. That means it is even smaller than that of nanoparticle. Say, generally what you can see is whenever a particle is of, say when you have pure elements or different elements, so at the normal uh, uniform distribution of electrons happen. So almost the property or the pure property of the pure element is almost identical wherever it is behaving. But when you try to reduce the size, that is structurally, that is especially when you go by layers from the normal layers to the nano layers or micro layers. So automatically what happens, the space in which, so nanotechnology is nothing but you try to reduce the structural space of that particular element. So ultimately the electrons which are there in the elements, so the particles, So automatically what happens, they have constraints because of space, because the free structure has now been constrained, right? So this particular constraint environment uh, induces certain behavioral change in the electrons. So automatically what happens, we have these electrons exhibiting different characteristic change according to the changes in their energy levels or their structural changes. So with all these behavioral changes evolve. So that is what they call it as quantum physics, where they call it as quantum dot or quantum effect, and that particular particle they call it as quantum dot. And they try to test it with various materials. Say, for example, in Russia, they tried to find an anomalous behavior in copper chloride nanoparticles, whereas in US they used cadmium sulfide, whereas in French they used different uh, components. So it shows that this particular quantum behavior can be achieved in a different types of compounds uh, because when you try to reduce them to nano level, so naturally at nanoscale, so these electrons of different particles try to have anomalous behavior, and they try to study that particular anomalous behavior. Okay, so smaller the nanoparticle, so naturally more the anomalous behavior of electron. So larger the nanoparticle, so you have less the anomalous behavior of uh, the nanoparticle. So quantum dots are those which are created with the minuscule structures. So they try to develop it to 1 to 100 nanometers. And the application is, say, naturally, we have wherever nanotechnology is in put in place. So quantum dots also have a specific uh, application, and most interestingly, it will be in quantum communication, because the quantum communication uses qubits, and when these qubits are generated, when you have nanoscale particles, then naturally the behavior of that particular qubits will be influenced. So automatically, quantum communication will have a different uh, different level of growth. Whereas on part of various other activities in medicine, in manufacturing, in other sectors, so definitely wherever electronics plays a major role with devices, so this particular quantum dots can play a significant role. So this is one important thing what we have it in chemistry. So in physics, it is about the electrons, whereas here it is the anomalous behavior of the electrons in the nano setup, that is the quantum physics. Okay, then in medicine, so they tried to figure it out how messenger RNA is featuring certain changes, right? So modifications in messenger RNA, how it happens, and why some messenger RNAs are affected, whereas some messenger RNAs are not affected. So what is the significance of messenger RNA? See, messenger RNA or mRNA is one which carries the genetic information from DNA to the mitochondria or the cell making or wherever it is. So it is a pass of carrier of information. So that information is very important because for a definite function, there is some information which is passed to a specific protein. So when you just cut this particular mRNA movement, automatically what happens? The information is not provided. So ultimately the information will be cut off. So there will be a greater reduction of a function which has to be desired to be started or halted, right? So this is one important thing. And that particular thing, if you do it artificially, we call it as genetic or gene silencing. So this is the one which was there way back a few years before. Gene silencing was given Nobel Prize. So now for mRNA. Okay, so in this mRNA, one important thing in mRNA is that this mRNA is a source of vaccine. That is, when we developed vaccine, especially during COVID and all, we had effective mRNA vaccines. Why? Because this mRNA can be synthesized with certain specific protein codes, right? Because you take some spikes from the COVID virus or any other virus, you just put it in another RNA thing. So this information will be carried, and you will trigger this particular immune system when this particular information is passed on to the particular protein generator of a cell. So this is how it happens. But when they developed this particular mRNA vaccine, so they identified that some mRNA in mammalian cells are not treated as foreign, whereas some mRNA, which is in vitro transcript, that is where you have changed, are taken as foreign, right? So the same RNA is there, but why one is taken up whereas the other is not taken up? So this is the actual point of discovery. So they discovered that in a natural RNA in a mammal, so they had some chemical modifications which were happening in the bases. So what are the bases? So there are RNA and DNA which consist of bases. So you have adenine, guanine, and so on. So same way AUGC. So we have the 4 bases, and there are some natural modifications which are happening to these mRNA when they move from one to the other, right? Whereas when you synthesize mRNA in lab, the in vitro transcription, when it happens, naturally it doesn't undergo that particular base change or base modification. So when base is not modified, so automatically when it is introduced in a body cell, the cells will identify it as a foreign, and naturally it will trigger the response against that particular mRNA, and they try to kill that particular mRNA. So now we understand what protein is required and how this particular base change happens and why we need to have this particular base change used as part of vaccine manufacture with respect to mRNA. So tomorrow when we have vaccines, so vaccines can be more faster and more affordable, and it will be easily synthesized. Okay, so which will be more flexible to cover a larger ambit of pathogens. So this is the basic idea why we had this mRNA vaccine or mRNA study was provided with Nobel Prize. So tomorrow when we have a vaccine which is based in mRNA based vaccines, so they will use this particular discovery as a base, and they try to add on the different base changes what is required after understanding the protein response. So naturally what happens, the immune system which will be triggered will be precise, and ultimately what happens, mammalian body will also have memory cells. So these memory cells will remember this particular activity, and they try to figure out the various immune aspects against the pathogen. So this is the logic of this Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine, right? So these 3 are the fundamentally important Nobel Prize. So all 3 can be asked with the basics, right? Then comes your economic sciences. Here, it is actually a study. Okay, so Claudia Goldin of US, so she had a study of information for around 200 years data. Okay, she collected 200 years data. That is during pre-industrialization and post-industrialization data, especially with the idea of understanding the labor market and how the labor market has a gender gap and why this particular gender gap is always present. So she had this particular data analyzed, and she collected it from US and various sources, and she started analyzing this particular reasons. So though she had this problem of confining to only one economy, and it is focusing on US alone, focusing on only a few data, and that too validity of that data doesn't have. So, but whatever it is, the study has provided an eye-opener on understanding how the pattern of structural changes happened. Especially, she had quoted the reasons for pattern change in the gender gap. And you can see these reasons which can be utilized in mains, especially in society and other aspects. Okay, so questions with regard to society or in governance, where they try to talk about the women contribution to economy. So you can use these reasons because these are officially provided. Okay, so marriage is a barrier. So you can see only 2% out of 20% of women in the labor market. So they are married. That is, they continue even after marriage. So marriage bar has prevented the employment of women in various fields. Okay, and similarly expectation. So what is women expected of a role to be played in society by the society? So that is one important thing. Parenthood and career decision couldn't be taken up by the girls because of the influences. So naturally, by their own mothers, it's an unfruitful career. So enterprising nature is reduced. Then increasing availability of contraceptive pills have allowed women to exercise greater control. So after industrialization and so on. So pre-industrialization, post-industrialization, and with the growth of various technologies, how women participation is affected. So that is a basic idea. So here it is more of mains part, and you can have mains points when you read this particular study, right? And she had also identified that it is a U-shaped curve since 1790s to 1970s. So how this particular society has changed from agriculture, industry, and service society. So when industrialization happened, women's role had been coming down, and later after World War I and II, it started picking up. And later when service industry started, then women started having more participation. And especially, you can see after 1914, 1919, and 1939, 1945. So the perspective on women, the perspective about empowering women, the perspective of contribution of women changed. And they politically also they participated. So there were equal franchisee votes which came in Western countries. And even in India, we had in 1917, women started voting, women contesting in elections. So political process came in. When they started participating politically, so their contribution slowly started to increase, and naturally the economic contribution also increased. So this is one study what Claudia had provided. Right. So then for peace and literature, so it is just personalities, human rights activist from Iran. So Narges Mohammadi. So she was provided Peace Prize for her advocacy against death penalty in Iran. And for the first time, she, after getting arrested and humiliated and with various other aspects, so she started opposing various custodial torture and other aspects with respect to, especially with women. So they started having this particular thing. And also, she was a one who expressed the support for Iranian hijab movement, where they focused on women empowerment. So she was chosen for it. As far as literature is concerned, Norwegian author and dramatist. So he was taken up for his work on minimalism, and his works were almost translated into 40 languages, and he was chosen, John Forsyth. So he was chosen for literature. So this is something, a minimal aspect what we have. So anyway, about Nobel Prize, we have already seen, and it went back to 1901 when it was established, and 1968, the economic sciences were put in place. And when you go with the stat, you can see totally 19 women have been awarded Nobel Peace Prize. So especially we have 65 Nobel Prize awarded to 64 women, and you can see 19 women in peace and 17 in literature, and we had 13 in physiology, and we have just 8 in chemistry, 5 in physics, and 3 in economic sciences. Okay, so the only woman who has been honored twice is Marie Curie. So for that, physics and chemistry. Okay, so that's the reason you have 64 women, because Madame Curie got 2. So you can see even in this distribution. So in sciences, we can see a very less contribution of women taking up career and contributing in research level and so on. So this disparity is the one which we could see largely comfortably literature, other jobs which were taken up by women at large. So that is what even Claudia has identified. So how they are retarding in the early days in contributing to the natural sciences and other stuff, and how they are not or they were directed by the society for their social change and social services or service related industries and so on. So anyway, so these are some of the important information about uh, Nobel Prize, and try to concentrate on the basics. Okay, so don't go into the deeper aspects of what the discovery is all about. So try to go to the fundamentals of those, because the questions are very simple with regard to these areas. Right? Thank you.